Some mornings start ordinary. This one didn't stay that way for long. My daughter walked into my house that morning unannounced, the way she often did, a casserole dish in her hands, for no real reason other than checking in. She heard voices from the living room before she saw anything, stopped cold. On the screen of my phone was a man in his mid-30s, grinning back at me like we'd known each other for years.
Barely a whisper. Mom, who is that?
That's Tunde. My daughter's face did something I hadn't seen since her father's funeral. Somewhere between confusion and fear and something close to betrayal, as if I'd been keeping a secret instead of just living. I didn't know it yet, standing in my own living room, that in 6 months, this same daughter would set a trap to prove that man was lying to me. I didn't know his own mother, 8,000 miles away, would ask him a question he couldn't answer for weeks. I didn't know any of it. I just knew, watching her face, that something in this house had finally cracked open. She couldn't believe it. Honestly, some days, neither could I. But to understand how we got to that moment, and everything that came after it, I have to take you back to where it actually started, not this kitchen. Before that, back to a house that had gotten far too quiet, and a woman who'd stopped expecting anything to change it. My name is Margaret Ellison. Everyone calls me Maggie. I'm 65 years old, and until 8 months ago, I believed one simple thing, that love had already happened to me once, and that was supposed to be enough for one lifetime. I was wrong about the enough part. I was right that it had already happened to me once. Robert had been gone 3 years. I'd gotten so good at living around that silence, I'd started calling it peace. It wasn't peace. I just didn't have another word for it yet. 31 years I taught second grade in this town. 31 years of chalk dust and small hands and Christmas cards from students who grew up and had children of their own. I thought that was supposed to be the whole story. A full life, quietly finished. I remember the exact evening my granddaughter talked me into downloading that app. Talking to the mail now, Maggie. That's a new low. I want to tell you I did it because I was brave. The truth is simpler than that. I was just tired of being careful. I didn't know yet that this one small, tired decision would end up costing my daughter and my future mother-in-law more sleep than either of them would ever admit to me. 8,000 miles away, in a city that hums even after midnight, there was a man closing his laptop after another long day, building things for people who would never know his name. His name is Tunde Ransom. He's 34 years old, and at the time, he believed something almost as simple as what I believed, that a man from his country would always be judged for the worst version of it before anyone bothered to meet the actual man. He wasn't wrong about that. He just didn't know yet how far one woman's family would go to prove it. He found my profile that night, scrolling half-tired through a handful of faces. He tells me now that what stopped his thumb wasn't a photograph. It was 4 words in my bio, still curious about the world.
Good evening, ma'am. Your bio made me smile. I'm Tunde from Lagos.
He tells me now he almost didn't send it. I think about that a lot. How close this whole story came to never happening, over one man's ordinary hesitation on one ordinary night. We talked every night for 2 months before either of us dared to call it anything. I want to be honest with you about something. I wasn't looking for a man. I was looking for a reason to stay curious about the world a little longer. I found both. He asked about my classroom, the 31 years of it. I asked about Lagos, about the mother who raised him with her own 2 hands, about a country the news back home only ever let me see one corner of. He cooked for me over video calls some nights, holding up ingredients to the camera like a nervous chef auditioning for a part he already had. I took notes like one of my old students. Somewhere in those 2 months, without either of us marking the exact day, I started laughing again. Not the polite kind, the kind that surprises you on the way out of your own mouth. I hadn't heard myself laugh like that since before Robert got sick. I didn't examine it too closely. I was afraid, if I looked directly at it, it might disappear. My daughter has always loved me the way a lifeguard loves the ocean, completely, and with one eye permanently on the danger. I understood her fear the second she walked into that room. I just wished, for once in her life, it hadn't arrived before her curiosity.
Mom, is this from Nigeria? Mom, please tell me you haven't sent him money.
Not everyone from Nigeria is after my social security check, Denise. I didn't know it that afternoon, But my daughter was already forming a plan. It would take 2 more weeks before I found out exactly what she intended to do, and when I did, it would test the two of us more than 14 years of ordinary disagreements ever had. Tunde had his own version of Denise. His name was Segun, a friend since secondary school, the kind who could tease you and protect you in the very same breath.
Bros, you don't go and fall for woman. We fit be your mama age mate.
I haven't felt this at peace talking to anyone in years, Segun. Not since my father passed.
Segun stopped laughing after that. Some truths do that to a room, no matter which country you're standing in. Not everyone reacted like my daughter did. Pastor Ray had known me since Robert's funeral, and he noticed the light coming back into my face before I said a single word about where it came from.
Wanting to feel alive isn't a sin, Maggie. Just let the people who love you walk with you through it, not against you.
I wish my daughter had been sitting in that pew. She'd find her own way there eventually. It would just cost her a great deal more than a Sunday morning to get there. That night, while I fell asleep smiling for the first time in longer than I could count, my daughter fed a different kind of hunger, the kind that only grows the more you feed it.
Or maybe figure out if it's actually bad first, before you go to war over it.
She didn't answer him. By morning, she already had a plan. I want you to sit with that for a moment, the way I've had to sit with it since. In 14 years of raising that girl, I never once taught her that fear and love could look exactly the same from a distance. I'm still not sure whose failure that was. Some tests you set for other people. Some you don't realize you've set for yourself. My daughter's cousin sat with a phone in her hand that week, a fake profile open on the screen, a message typed and waiting, her thumb hovering over send. She told my daughter, more than once, that it felt wrong. My daughter didn't listen. By the end of that week, one woman would prove exactly who she was, and it wasn't the one anybody expected. But first, let me take you back to where this particular storm started brewing. I'll say this for my daughter. When she decides to protect someone, she doesn't do it halfway. She sat her younger cousin down at a coffee shop that week and laid out a plan on a napkin like she was drawing up a contract, a fake profile, young, pretty, flirtatious. If he took the bait, she'd have her proof. Her cousin didn't like it. She said so, more than once. Denise didn't hear her. What she did next, I still don't fully forgive, but I understand it a little better now than I did then. Somewhere in Toronto, at least on paper, a woman appeared in Tunde's messages that week, 26 years old, flirtatious, and entirely fictional. He didn't know it yet, but he was about to answer a question none of us had asked him directly. He read her messages, paused, and answered plainly that he appreciated her reaching out, but he was already building something serious with someone. She pushed a little harder, to be sure. His answer didn't move an inch. He told her, gently, that whoever had asked her to test him should know he wasn't going anywhere. Her cousin brought the screenshots back to Denise, expecting vindication. What she got instead was a small crack in her own certainty. He knew Denise. He basically called us out, and he didn't even entertain it. Maybe he's just smart about covering his tracks. Even Denise didn't sound like she believed that. Tunde told me himself, that same night, before anyone else could tell me a version with the edges sharpened against him. I didn't want secrets between us. I called my daughter that night and said something I'm not proud of, but don't regret. You don't get to test the man I care about like he's a criminal on trial. If you have concerns, you ask me, not some fake girl online. Segun worried about something I hadn't considered, not whether Tunde had done anything wrong, but whether the world would believe him even when he hadn't. He warned him that if this thing ever leaked, people would call him guilty, not her family. That's how it worked for men like him. Tunde had heard some version of that warning his whole life. He was tired of it. He just never said so out loud until that night. My son, who usually stays out of arguments the way other people stay out of the rain, finally said something to his sister that needed saying. He asked her, point blank, what she thought would have happened if the trap had actually worked, whether she'd have called that proof, when she was the one who'd built the whole setup herself. That night, on a call that lasted longer than either of us admitted to afterward, I apologized for my family. He didn't let me finish. He told me I didn't have to apologize for her fear. He just hoped, one day, it would turn into trust instead. I sat with that a long time after we hung up. Some men would have used that moment to walk away, He used it to ask for more patience instead. There's someone in this story I haven't told you enough about. My daughter's cousin, Tiffany. She was 24 that year, still finding her footing, and she'd agreed to that whole scheme, mostly because it's hard to say no to family when you're the youngest one in the room. She told Denise, weeks later, that watching a stranger refuse to betray a woman he'd never even met had done something to her. She said she wanted better for herself than being the kind of person people could talk into setting traps. I think about that sometimes, how one man's quiet integrity can end up teaching a lesson he never meant to give. My daughter didn't sleep well that week. I know because she called me twice past midnight, saying nothing important, just needing to hear my voice, still sounded like my own. I didn't push her to explain herself. I'd learned, by then, that some apologies need time to finish cooking before you serve them. I want to tell you something about my daughter that I don't think I said clearly enough yet. She has never once, in her whole life, done anything by half measures. Not her fear, and eventually, not her love either. That week, she was still deep in the fear part. By the end of that month, something had shifted, even if nobody would have called it resolved yet. Tunde sent Denise a message directly for the first time, not through me, not through anyone else. He told her simply that he understood why she'd done what she did, and that he hoped, someday, they could start over on steadier ground. She didn't answer right away, but she didn't delete it either. I noticed that. I noticed everything that year. I want to tell you about a woman named Nia from my church group, because she said something to me that week that I still think about. She'd been married 30 years to a man everyone in town respected, and she told me, over coffee, that the families who love loudest are sometimes the ones who trust the least. That love, done right, doesn't need to test people to prove itself. I didn't know yet how much I'd need to remember that advice in the months still ahead of us. I didn't fully understand, that month, what it cost Tunde to be tested the way he had been. He told me much later that he'd gone back to his apartment after learning about the fake profile and sat alone for over an hour, not angry, just tired in a way he didn't have words for yet. He said the hardest part wasn't the accusation itself. It was realizing how easily it could have gone the other way, how one weak moment, one moment of loneliness answered wrong, could have cost him everything he was quietly building with me, before he'd even had the chance to prove who he really was. My son called Tunde directly that same week, something I only learned about afterward. He apologized on behalf of the family, plainly, without being asked to. He told him that whatever his sister had done, it didn't reflect what the rest of us believed about him. Tunde told me later that the call meant more to him than he let on at the time, that sometimes one honest voice is enough to make you believe the whole family isn't lost. There's a question every parent eventually asks: if they love their child enough to be afraid for them. Tunde's mother asked him hers at a dinner table in Lagos that week. She told him plainly that she wasn't worried about what the world thought of him. She was worried about what happened to him after I was gone. He didn't have an answer for her that night. It would take him a while to find one. Let me take you back to the dinner that started it. If Denise was my ocean-loving lifeguard, Funmi was Tunde's, 8,000 miles away, but somehow just as close to the danger she imagined. She sat him down with his uncle Femi and asked him directly what exactly this was. An older woman from America. His uncle, half joking, asked if I wanted him for house help in my old age, or if I had money I meant to share. What Tunde said next, he told me later, wasn't really meant for his mother. It was meant for every assumption he'd carried his whole life without ever getting to answer back.
Mama, over 230 million people live in this country. The world reduces all of us to one bad label. Most of us are just people working hard, trying to build a life.
Funmi's answer wasn't the argument he expected. It was something harder to dismiss. A mother's fear, plain and unashamed.
I'm not worried about what the world thinks of you, my son. I'm worried about what happens to you when she's gone.
He carried that question to me the same night, still raw from it. I didn't have a clean answer either. I just had the truth. I won't pretend I'll be here forever, but I won't let fear of tomorrow stop me from living today. Is that enough for you?
It has to be, because you're worth it.
News travels fast in Lagos neighborhoods. Faster, sometimes, than it should. Word of the American woman reached Uncle Femi before he was ready for it, and something in him surprised even himself. When a neighbor pushed him about it in the street, he found himself defending Tunde instead of joining in. He'd been the loudest doubter at that dinner table. Turned out, doubt and loyalty could live in the same man. I told Denise what Funmi had said, half expecting her to dismiss it. Instead, something shifted in her face. The first time she'd considered that fear might look the same on both sides of an ocean. She admitted she'd assumed it was just about money. I told her it was funny, how fear looks the same no matter which side of the ocean you're standing on. Some nights, Tunde didn't need advice. He just needed someone who knew him before any of this to remind him he wasn't imagining the weight of it. He told Segun some days he just wanted to enjoy my company without every phone call turning into a defense case. Segun told him, "That's just how love works sometimes. Nobody ever tells you it'll be easy." There's a part of Funmi's story I only learned much later, from Tunde himself, and I think it belongs here. She had been engaged once herself, in her 20s, to a man his family disapproved of, for reasons that had nothing to do with love and everything to do with which part of the country his people came from. That engagement ended quietly, without a real fight, and she married Tunde's father instead. A good man, but not, she admitted once, the one she'd have chosen if she'd been braver at 23. I understood something differently after Tunde told me that. Funmi wasn't just afraid for her son's future. She was watching her own past ask her, all over again, whether she'd let fear make a decision love should have made instead. Back in Ohio, my daughter kept reading, but something in what she read had started to shift. She found articles, this time, about the country itself, instead of just the scams associated with it. She read about its universities, its music, its booming film industry, the sheer scale of a place most Americans only ever saw in headlines about the worst of it. She didn't tell me she was doing this. Kevin did, months later, almost as an aside. I think she needed to arrive at it privately, on her own terms, before she could ever say it out loud to me. Funmi picked up her phone one night that week, fully intending to call me directly for the first time. Mother to mother, she told Tunde later, woman to woman. She put the phone down twice before she found the courage. When she finally did call, 3 weeks later, it would be one of the most important conversations of this whole story. But that week, she still needed more time. Tunde talked to me that week about his father for the first time in real detail. A quiet man, he said, who died when Tunde was 19, leaving Funmi to raise him and his younger sister alone. He told me his father used to say that a man's worth wasn't measured by what people assumed about him, but by what he actually did when no one was watching. I understood, hearing that, exactly where Tunde's steadiness came from. It wasn't something he'd built for my benefit. It was something he'd inherited, the same way I'd inherited my own mother's stubbornness. Not everyone in Tunde's neighborhood gossiped the way Mama Chioma did. There was an older woman 2 doors down, a widow herself, who simply nodded at him differently after the news got around. A small, knowing kindness that needed no explanation. Tunde told me he found that quieter than Uncle Femi's public defense, but somehow it meant just as much. I caught myself, one night that week, standing in front of my bathroom mirror longer than usual, doing the thing women my age aren't supposed to admit to doing, searching my own face for the age everyone kept bringing up like it was the whole story. I didn't find an answer in that mirror. I found, instead, a kind of permission I hadn't given myself in years, to just be a woman who was loved, without needing to explain or defend the math of it to anyone, including myself.